My name is Elise Granger. And last night my family called me a parasite over dinner. Rachel sat at the head of the table, the perfect CEO in a white silk blouse, raising her glass to toast her own success. To building something real, she said, her eyes gliding to me like a blade. Some of us create value, some of us just take. My father chuckled. My mother smiled too long. And I kept my hands folded, feeling the weight of years press behind my ribs. Rachel leaned back, voice smooth as if rehearsed for a press conference. You know, Elise has always been like this, she continued, swirling her wine. She hides behind small jobs, never commits, never gives back. I built a company from scratch, helped mom and dad with their mortgage, even covered Aunt Laura's surgery. And Elise? She can't even show up when it matters. I watched her mouth form the story she'd polished into legend and wondered if she remembered who paid for the logo she bragged about. My father cleared his throat, pretending fairness. Your sisters worked hard. Elise, maybe it's time you learned to step up. My mother nodded, adding softly, it's just, you're 33. You could contribute more. Their tone was gentle, practiced, the kind that hurts more because it sounds reasonable. I lifted my glass and said, you're right. I should have learned earlier, especially how to make generosity look like theater. The room fell quiet enough to hear the chandelier hum. Rachel's smile didn't break. Always with the sarcasm. She said, you can't even accept truth when it's gift-wrapped. I looked at her and answered, truth doesn't need wrapping. Rachel, it just needs receipts. She laughed too loudly. Certain I was bluffing. I wasn't. In my bag, beneath the napkin with a smudge of lipstick, was a sealed envelope marked Northbridge Holdings, my quiet note that this dinner would be the last time they ever mistook silence for weakness. Rachel always believed her rise came from vision and grit. But the real structure beneath her empire carried my fingerprints. 4 years ago, when her company was collapsing under unpaid contracts and empty promises, I had already arranged the lifeline through Northbridge Holdings. Mason, my attorney, looked at the balance sheet and said, 80 million into a company this fragile? That's suicide. I told him it wasn't suicide, it was an experiment in faith disguised as anonymity. And faith, unlike credit, didn't ask for applause. Rachel thought a San Francisco venture group had seen her brilliance. She announced the funding with a tearful interview about women in tech, her voice trembling as she said, when you work hard enough, the universe rewards you. I watched from the quiet of my apartment, half amused, half tired, because I had learned the universe was just a series of contracts with fine print. She celebrated the investment with champagne. I reviewed quarterly reports written by Tyler, the CFO I'd quietly installed, making sure her chaos didn't infect the product again. She spent the next 2 years polishing the illusion of genius. Every conference panel, every photo op, every Forbes feature built her myth higher. My name stayed buried inside 6 corporate shells, a chain of signatures no one could trace. The board meetings Tyler attended on my behalf became the real pulse of Mindspring budgets balanced. Payroll stabilized. Engineers hired by merit instead of charisma. Rachel's charisma, however, became her currency. She traded it for validation while the numbers did the actual talking. At family gatherings, Dad would beam. That's my daughter, the CEO. And Rachel would nod modestly before glancing at me as if to confirm my invisibility. I'd smile and refill my glass, counting how many lies could fit into a single toast. The proof of my silence wasn't peace, it was precision. By the 3rd year, I saw the red flags in her expansion reports, inflated user metrics, duplicate contracts, marketing expenses that exceeded research by 40%. I sent Tyler a note, audit quietly. he replied. We're holding them together with duct tape and charm. That line stayed with me, because I understood both materials well. One keeps things functional, the other keeps people fooled. The email from my mother came with her usual tone of obligation disguised as kindness. Grandma needed full-time care at a medical facility, and everyone was expected to contribute based on income. Rachel replied first. Writing. I'll cover $3,000 monthly. Family takes care of family. Within an hour. Her post about it was already on her company's social feed, captioned with a photo of Grandma and the words, "Leadership begins at home." I didn't reply to the thread. I logged into my corporate account and scheduled an automatic transfer of $9,000 each month directly to the facility. The director called 2 days later. Her voice courteous. Ms. Granger. I wanted to confirm that Northbridge Holdings will continue covering the full cost of Mrs. Lillian's care. I said. Yes. And please keep that information private. She paused before answering. Of course. Though I should note we haven't received any other family payments since your account began. When I hung up, the silence in my apartment felt like the only honest sound left. The next Sunday, Rachel raised another toast about compassion. She smiled at me across the table and said, Some people give excuses. Some of us just give. My father nodded proudly. My mother dabbed her eyes, and I realized how easily they mistook noise for virtue. I cut my food carefully, thinking of Grandma watching daytime television in her quiet room. Cared for by strangers, I paid. Later that night, I checked Rachel's financial statements again. Her company had just closed a $20 million contract renewal. Yet she'd told our parents she was a little tight this quarter. I forwarded the report to Mason with a single line. Keep this archived. He replied. Understood. It wasn't anger that moved my hand. It was clarity. There's a difference between sacrifice and performance. And every invoice I paid on Grandma's behalf made the difference harder to ignore. The next family dinner would come soon enough. And when it did, they'd raise their glasses again. Unaware that the toast itself had already become a lie, I was done financing. Rachel's foundation launch looked less like charity and more like a press conference. The ballroom glittered with donors, photographers, and her favorite phrase projected behind her, building compassion through leadership. When she took the microphone, her tone carried that polished warmth she reserved for public admiration. Family, she began, pausing just long enough to glance at me, teaches you the value of service. Some of us live it. Others prefer to watch from the sidelines. The crowd laughed politely, mistaking cruelty for humor. My mother joined in, nervous and proud, while my father leaned over to whisper, She's right. Elise, this is what contribution looks like. Rachel kept talking, her voice smooth as glass. Even within my own family, generosity is uneven, but I suppose some people just weren't built for responsibility. I smiled without showing teeth and replied, Responsibility doesn't always need an audience. The microphone picked up my voice, and a few heads turned. Rachel lifted her chin. You're always so mysterious. Elise, one day you'll realize silence isn't a virtue, it's avoidance. I met her gaze, and one day you'll realize volume isn't proof of meaning. She laughed, thinking she'd won the exchange, and the applause that followed her speech confirmed it. I finished my drink, my hand steady on the glass. In my clutch, beneath the event program, was a folded letter addressed to Mason. Execute withdrawal, Northbridge Holdings. All capital. 30 days. The celebration roared on. But my decision was already louder. The morning after the launch, I opened my laptop and sent Mason a single sentence that would end 4 years of silence. Initiate full withdrawal of Northbridge Holdings capital from Mindspring Solutions effective immediately. His reply came within minutes. Elise, you realize this will cripple them. Are you sure? I typed back. They were never mine to protect. That was the entire conversation. Clean and surgical. The way endings should be. By noon, the legal notice had gone out to the board, triggering the clauses Rachel had never read carefully. Tyler called to confirm the execution of the order. This will freeze every operational account, he said. Payroll, credit lines, vendor contracts, they'll all go dark within 48 hours. I told him. Then we'll finally see what her company is without borrowed oxygen. He didn't argue. The truth had always been buried in our spreadsheets, waiting for a moment like this to surface. By 5. The first message arrived on my phone, Rachel's voice sharp with disbelief. Elisa, something's wrong. Our investor just pulled out 80 million gone. They won't tell us why. You work in that world. Have you heard anything? I deleted it before it finished. The next voicemail was shakier. Elise, please. This could destroy everything I've built. I'm begging you. Just call me back. I listened until her voice cracked on the word begging, then closed my inbox. The irony didn't sting. It settled like balance being restored. For the first time in years, silence wasn't the wound, it was the verdict. The collapse started quietly, like a slow leak nobody wanted to notice. Within a week, vendors froze shipments. Engineers quit mid-project. And Rachel's PR team issued a statement about temporary restructuring. My phone lit up that night with my father's number. Elise, he said, his voice tight with forced calm. Your sister's company is going through a crisis. Maybe you could use your connections. Talk to someone. Help her out. I answered. I already have. For 4 years straight. He didn't understand. Or maybe he refused to. The next call came from my mother. Rachel's exhausted. She's been in meetings all day trying to save those jobs. Family should come together now. Elise, I told her. Family should have come together when you all decided I was the disappointment. She sighed, whispering like the phone might judge her. Why are you being cruel? This isn't about old wounds. I said. It's exactly about old wounds because you keep pretending they're healed. The silence on the line was longer than any apology she could have given. By Friday, Rachel called herself. Her voice carried the kind of panic money can't disguise. I need help. Elise. Payroll's in jeopardy. Investors are gone. And 48 people could lose their jobs. I asked. How much do you need? She hesitated. Then admitted. 80 million would stabilize operations. I said. Interesting number. That's what your main investor committed. Right? She caught her breath. You know about that? I replied. I know about a lot of things I paid for. Do's it. The next morning, my parents arranged a family meeting. Desperate to stage another intervention disguised as unity, my father opened with, We just want peace. I looked at all of them and said, Peace doesn't come from pretending thieves are victims. No one spoke after that. Some truths, once released, don't echo, they detonate. The dinner that night felt rehearsed. Every word dipped in guilt and coated with denial. My father opened with, We're here to support Rachel through this. As a family, my mother added, Everyone is pledging what they can to help her rebuild. Rachel's voice trembled on cue. We just need a little bridge funding until new investors come in. I asked. How much is a little? She glanced down. Calculating. 80 million would cover our runway. I said. Convenient number. That's exactly what Northbridge funded before they pulled out. The table went still enough for the sound of breathing to feel intrusive. Rachel's eyes widened. How do you know that? I unlocked my phone, opened an email, and slid it across the table. Because I signed it. She frowned, reading slowly, lips parting as if each line burned. This is a Northbridge Holdings authorization from 4 years ago. I nodded. It's my firm. She looked up, face drained. You've been, yes, I said before she could finish. I was Northbridge. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father muttered something about misunderstanding. But the room already knew. Rachel's voice cracked into disbelief. You saved my company and didn't tell me? I said. You called it your company. I called it a responsibility. There's a difference. My father leaned forward, desperate to restore control. If this is true, Elise, why hide it? Why not tell us? I met his eyes. Because you never asked what I did, you only decided who I was. He didn't answer. For a man obsessed with facts, silence was the only confession he could manage. Rachel whispered. Why end it now? I said. Because last week you stood in front of a crowd and called me selfish. You said I never sacrificed. My mother's voice wavered. We didn't know. I said. You didn't want to. Rachel's composure broke. Please. Elise. You'll ruin everything. The jobs. The people. This isn't about us anymore. I told her. You should have thought about them before you built an empire out of borrowed faith. The air thinned, and nobody dared interrupt what came next. I stood, looked at Rachel, and said quietly, For 4 years I gave you the benefit of silence. Tonight, I'm taking it back. Adito. The fallout didn't need my voice. The headlines did it for me. Mindspring Faces' sudden collapse after anonymous investor withdrawal ran across every business outlet before noon. Rachel called that night, her tone brittle. You think you've won? She said. You've destroyed everything I built. I told her. You destroyed it the moment you believed the applause was equity. She snapped. You can't stand to see me succeed. I said. No. I can't stand to see you confuse performance with progress. The line went dead. But the message landed exactly where I wanted it. Within 48 hours, former partners revoked contracts, and Rachel's PR team tried spinning the story into betrayal. My mother called, trembling, Your sister's being dragged online. Elise, they're calling her a fraud. I said, They're finally using the right word. She whispered, People are cruel. I answered, Only when the truth hits their comfort zone. My father added quietly, She's still your sister. I replied, Then maybe you should have raised 2 daughters instead of 1 golden child and 1 scapegoat. The silence afterward was its own obituary. When Rachel showed up at my office 3 days later, she looked smaller but still rehearsed. You've proven your point, she said. Now you're just being vindictive. I closed my laptop and looked at her. You mistake accountability for revenge. I told her. This isn't punishment, it's inventory. She tried to laugh. You really think this makes you better than me? I said. No. Rachel, it just makes me free. 20-day. Grandma's funeral drew every relative who had once mistaken performance for love. Rachel stood near the altar, rehearsed even in grief. Her voice steady as she said, She taught us unity. The importance of standing together as a family. I stepped forward before anyone could clap. Unity? I asked. You mean the kind built on silence and borrowed credit? Her eyes flashed. And she whispered, Not here. Elise, don't make this about you. I said. I'm not. I'm making it about the truth. She deserved that much. Jaswati. Rachel tried to keep her composure. You really can't let anything go. Can you? I looked at her and said, You built a legacy on pretending to care. Grandma actually did. My mother hissed. Enough. Eliza. This isn't the place. I turned to her. It's exactly the place. She believed in honesty. Remember? Or did you forget that when you let Rachel take credit for everything she never paid for? The air thickened. No one dared interrupt again. Rachel's voice finally broke. You think this makes you noble? I answered. No. It just makes me done. Then I lowered my voice so only she could hear. Grandma's gone. Rachel, there's nothing left for you to perform for. She looked away, her confidence collapsing in silence. I walked out before anyone spoke again, leaving her applause unearned. 3 months after the funeral, I rebuilt what mattered quietly. Without witnesses, my new company focused on healthcare technology, the kind that actually saved lives instead of reputations. Tyler joined me first, followed by 10 engineers who'd survived Mindspring's collapse. When people asked if I missed the old days, I said, no. I just upgraded the definition of purpose. The work grew faster than the noise ever did. One afternoon, an email arrived from Rachel. I'm working again, contract coding. It's small, but honest. Thank you for doing what I never had the courage to. I read it twice before replying. I'm glad you found something real. Her message ended with, you were right about silence. It's not weakness, it's maintenance. I smiled, knowing she finally understood the thing she once mocked, the value of staying unseen until it mattered. Months later, my mother called. Your father and I saw your company in the papers. We're proud of you. I told her. Thank you. But I didn't do it for pride. She hesitated, then said, maybe not. But you taught us something about what love actually looks like. After we hung up, I sat in my office, watching the city stretch past the glass. The view hadn't changed, but the story had. Power wasn't about being louder. It was about never needing to explain why you stopped talking. Thank you for staying with my story until the end. If it made you rethink what strength sounds like when it speaks quietly, subscribe and stay close. Every story here begins where silence used to live. The next one might remind you how power feels when it finally stops asking for permission.